What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video, as potentially some bad news has come out for the New York Giants. That, of course, involving Kyle Rudolph. Rudolph, the tight end that the New York Giants acquired, that I personally felt fit the offense very well. I thought he could fulfill that Jason Witten-like role, and he still may be with the Giants. We're going to have to wait and see. Now, the deal was agreed upon, as are most deals, before they actually sign on the dotted line, but it had not been signed yet. The New York Giants, it was pending a physical today, brought Kyle Rudolph in, and according to Mike Garoppolo, we're going to start with that. Bad news for Rudolph. There's a snag in the Giants' addition of tight end Kyle Rudolph. Sources say the team's medical staff is concerned with Rudolph's foot after his physical and believes he'll need surgery. The sides are discussing how to proceed. The 2-year deal was agreed to, but not yet signed. So we'll see what happens with Kyle Rudolph and with the New York Giants. But if he does, in fact, have to get foot surgery, I'm not sure how long he's going to be out. And then the Giants have to ask themselves, is it worth committing $12 million over the next 2 years, 4.5 this year, 7.5 next, to Kyle Rudolph? And, you know, like I said, I thought he'd be a great help to Daniel Jones, a great blocker, still might be. Really good in the red zone, a tall target, a sure-handed tight end. But if the New York Giants do, in fact, decide to move on, and we've seen this before in free agency. I remember a couple of years ago it happened with the New York Jets when they signed Anthony Barr. Barr backed out of it last minute after committing to the New York Jets. Well, this would be the New York Giants backing out from Kyle Rudolph. Apparently, the Giants and Rudolph are having a meeting, and maybe they'll talk down the contract due to the injury, or maybe the Giants will let him go, or possibly the Giants will just leave it as is, and maybe the surgery won't take more than, 3 or 4 months. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. But if the Giants do, in fact, move on from Kyle Rudolph, well, what does that mean for this football team? Well, right off the bat, you're going to have another $4.5 million on this year's cap, being that was what was going towards Kyle Rudolph this year. It would have been $7.5 million next year. So $7.5 million will be tacked on to next year's cap. So I guess that's the good news, but obviously this is not good news if we lose him, and that'll leave the New York Giants scrambling to potentially try to sign another free agent. You have to figure with that extra $4.5 million, the Giants, who have been very aggressive this free agency, will look to sign somebody else. And I'm not looking at the tight end market right now, but you would imagine by now most of the prominent tight ends are out. But the signing of Kyle Rudolph, if they were to move on, would lead you to believe, as a Giants fan, that they would prioritize potentially drafting a tight end in this year's draft if they were not to sign one. They clearly viewed it as a need. He was their third biggest signing in free agency, and they plan to use him in a 2 tight end set, presumably with Evan Ingram if he remains on the roster, which in my opinion would put Kyle Pitts back in play if the New York Giants decide to take him, if he were to fall to 11. Of course, he had a fantastic pro day, so I wouldn't bank on it that he would even be there at 11, but this opens up the door if the Giants do, in fact, move on from Kyle Rudolph. The other thing, Pat Freiermuth, second-round prospect out of Penn State. If he were there, I think the Giants would entertain that as well, and he may fit more of the mold of a Kyle Rudolph-like tight end. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on. In terms of what they're going to do with that money, they could just leave it as is and use it as a draft expense, or they could go out there and try to fill in a hole in this team. And I've been very outspoken. As of now, I think the Giants got 2 obvious needs going into this draft when you had Rudolph on the roster. And being that more than likely you're not going to be able to find another tight end of his caliber in free agency, maybe you set yourself to one of those needs. That, of course, being an interior offensive lineman and potentially a more prominent edge rusher. 2 names that have been linked to the New York Giants over the last week or so. Who knows how much validity there is to it, is Trey Turner and, of course, Jadeveon Clowney. Clowney, of course, injury history. The same can be said for Trey Turner. I'm not giving either one of these guys a long-term contract, but are they good enough to fill the void for 1 year on a prove-it contract with the money that would be left from Rudolph? I suppose it's possible. I don't know what Trey Turner's market would be. I don't think Jadeveon Clowney made a lot of money because of his injury going into this year. And, of course, he didn't produce that much. I would think he'd be a relatively cheap contract, maybe in that $4.5 to $5 million range, and maybe the Giants would elect to do that, giving themselves more freedom in the draft to do something else. I personally think if they feel like Turner is even 90% of what he once was off of this injury, he is still worth bringing in here on the right price. You look at the guards right now in this team, and I say it all the time, can you really trust him? Trey Turner, of course, drafted by Dave Gettleman, is a 5-time Pro Bowler, coming off a very bad year, though, in which he suffered an injury. So we'll see what the New York Giants decide to do. But of course, yeah, this is a guy that you were now depending on going into the draft to be a big part of your offense. You invested $12 million into Kyle Rudolph. It only makes sense that they were going to use him. And, you know, maybe they stick with what they got. Maybe now Caden Smith is back in the fold, Levine Toilolo, and they think elsewhere. But I think that this would at least open up the possibility of the New York Giants definitely potentially focusing once again on a weapon in the first round, whether it's Kyle Pitts or whether it's another wide receiver, because we all know they need some punch to this offense. And the fact that they brought in Rudolph only leads me to believe that you would think they'd be looking to fulfill that hole, being that they obviously demonstrated that they needed a tight end. We're going to have to wait and see how it all plays out, but bad news for the New York Giants. Hopefully they make the best out of it. It was seeming too good. It was too good to be true. We couldn't have a flawless offseason. That's not the Giants' way. It was an A+. This isn't Dave Gettleman's fault. This isn't the New York Giants' fault. This is common practice. They didn't bring him in for a meeting before they agreed on it. You know, probably due to several factors. They brought him in, and the Giants at least have questions. That does not mean that he won't be on the team. That does not mean that the Giants may not bring him back on a reduced salary, or that maybe they don't feel like it's as serious as Mike Garoppolo is leading on at this point in time. But reading that, being that he's saying that there is a snag, makes me think that Giants may be looking somewhere else for a tight end, and it could very well be in the first or second round of this year's draft. We're going to have to wait and see how it all plays out. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.